the first thing that I want to talk about today is the mindset of a kingdom entrepreneur or a kingdom builder or a full stack Christian or somebody who is operating with biblical Christian financial principles. I'm saying it like 5 different ways to say the same thing. And it's important because there are differences in how wealthy people think about money and not wealthy people think about money. And it's important for you, being a good steward and wise, that you understand the difference. So what I want to talk today about is very important. And I want you all to press into understanding this and understanding this well and understanding this thoroughly and deeply and comprehensively. Because no matter where you're starting, if you can wrap your hands around this, you will be successful. And if you can't, then you won't. We live in this world, but we're not of this world. The danger is when Christians who are trying to operate, I call it a kingdom operating system, right? And that encompasses our family, our friendships, our fitness, our finances, our focus. And that's like being a full stack Christian. If you look through the Bible, it's very clear that God wants us to be operating on all 8 cylinders. Jesus didn't pay the price for us to operate on 3 cylinders. He didn't pay the price for us to operate on 2 cylinders. He paid the price for us to operate on all 8 cylinders, if you will. So the incubator, the bulk of the incubator is the financial cylinder. And if you break it down into its simplest terms, it's this. The Bible teaches the principle of the river, not the bucket. The Bible teaches us the principle of the pipeline, not the bucket. The Bible teaches us the principle of the orchard, not the apple. And the best way to understand that is to think in terms of a bucket. And you've got a bucket of water. You reach in, you've got a 1 cup measuring object. You pull out 1 cup of water from the bucket. What happens to the level of water in the bucket? Well, right, if this is your bucket and you remove 1 cup, the level goes down by 1 cup, right? Pretty simple. Now, if you contrast that with a river and you remove 1 cup from the river, what happens to the volume of the river? Absolutely nothing. Not a single thing. Okay? So that's what the Bible teaches. And you can see that in Proverbs, where it talks about you'll have goats, you'll sell the hay, you'll sell the wool, you'll sell the milk, and you'll have milk for your servant girls. Okay? That's the principle of equity. Now, I say all that to say, if you can boil it down and understand this principle of bucket versus river, then everything else will fall into place. Because financial freedom is then quite simply this. If this is money and this is time, then, and this is our level of our monthly nut that we have to crack, right? So to pay our bills, to take care of business, this is the minimum level. Then as soon as we hit up here, we're financially free, okay? Now the challenge is many people try to do this with the vehicle of a job. And again, there's nothing wrong with jobs. Don't misunderstand me. But I believe if you're called to business, if you're called to giving, if you're called to building the kingdom, then a job is a passing through point. A job is a means to an end. A job is not the destination. Because if God has put on your heart to be a big giver, then guess what? You've got to be a big receiver to be a big giver. If he can get it through us, he can get it to us. And God's a God of abundance. Just look at an apple orchard. There's apples rotting on the ground. God is a God of surplus and abundance. The challenge with this mechanism or this vehicle for creating income, right? And again, we're talking about the baseline needs for financial freedom and independence, which is our monthly budget, is that a job income is taxed at the highest possible level, right? When you're making six figures, the highest level at this stage is like 38, 37%. It's a stair-step system. So your first 10, 20 grand of income, you're taxed less than your last chunk of income. So you have an effective tax rate, you have a marginal tax rate. The bottom line is if you're earning income from a job, you're taxed at your highest level. Most people don't think about that. When you look at your income and expenses, our two greatest sources of expense are tax and interest that we pay on things like credit cards, home mortgages, car notes, consumer debt, department store debt, all that stuff that we call consumption. So if we're trying to be good stewards, then part of our stewardship formula must be, how do we reduce our greatest expenses? Right? When Jesus told the parable of the talents, there was three people, two of them doubled, five brought back five, two brought back two, one of them buried it, didn't bring back anything. He was pretty fired up at the dude who buried it. He did not like that. So a job income is not only taxed at the highest rate, but you're capped. Okay. Now, again, a job is a means to an end. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. We can be grateful. The challenge with jobs are, not only are we taxed at the highest rate, not only are we capped at our income, the next challenges for kingdom builders is someone else tells us where to go, when to show up, when to eat, when to go to the bathroom. Someone else determines our associations, who we are around, which determines the activity that goes on between our ears, our thinking patterns, our processes. Someone else controls our time. And I don't believe that that's the highest and best for God's kids. I believe we're called to freedom. And again, this is if you're called to entrepreneurship. There's many people that are just called to a job, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. We need plenty of people, but I'm saying that if somebody's called to entrepreneurship, then this is the mindset that they must adopt and build and reinforce. If you're called to be a big giver and sower, then a job at some point should become unacceptable to you because it's beneath your capacity. Okay. So understand my heart on this thing. Again, I'm thankful for all the jobs I had. I don't have any problem with jobs. I do have a problem with a job if somebody's called to more. I have a problem with my brothers and sisters settling. I have a problem with my brothers and sisters sowing $2,000 a year into the kingdom as opposed to $200,000 a year into the kingdom. So again, I'm qualifying this because people are coming on this call at different times, and I don't want somebody to hear me and think I'm bashing jobs. I am not. But if God has called you to be a black belt, then don't settle for being a white belt, period. Okay? Now, the challenge with these jobs is the tax rate, the time, the someone else controlling what we think about, often someone else controlling. It's not a headship position. The other problem with a job is it's borrowed. A job is not owned. Go ask anybody who's been laid off unexpectedly. There is no ownership in a job. The way of the pension has gone. The other problem with a job is the investment opportunities in the investment vehicles. The other problem with a job is most of the time, the people that we associate with in a job are often middle class. And as a result, we often follow worldly patterns of what to do with our money and how to invest and how to think about it and how to stewardship it. Right? So monthly nut is here. You know, for most people, that's 5 to 15K. You can do a lot of damage. You're good to go, right? So this then becomes our primary objective. Let's have this covered without a job. Let's have this covered some other way. Let's have this covered so our nut is covered, whether we're traveling, sleeping, regardless of what we're doing. Let's have our nut covered. Okay. So then the question becomes, well, how do we do that? And there's different ways to accomplish and achieve that objective. Each one of the different ways has a different type of income associated with it, or a different quality of income, meaning it's taxed differently. And for the sake of keeping this relatively brief, I'm not going to get into all those different parameters because you don't need to worry about all those different parameters. Here's what I want to show you. I said that 15 minutes worth of talking to get to this point next. And this is the point that I want you guys to tune into and gals to tune into. And this is the point that I want you to go deep with and study and learn and understand. This is the difference between wealthy and middle class. Okay, you ready? Here's what the wealthy do. Here's what the middle class do. The middle class take their income and they use their income on expenses and they use their income to buy liabilities. Okay. Now, let me back up a minute. Let's first define what an asset is, and let's next define what a liability is. Because most people, especially in the middle class, have confusion about these two things. And I did too. So I'm going to simplify it and clarify it for you. Okay. I don't care what anybody says. Here's how wealthy people think about this. An asset does one thing and only one thing. An asset puts money in your pocket. An asset puts money in your pocket. A liability, on the other hand, does the opposite. A liability takes money from your pocket. Okay? So, most people think of their primary residence as an asset. I don't. And here's why. Every month, even if I own that thing free and clear, there's still expenses associated with that property. Taxes, insurance, maintenance, upkeep, yard, utilities. And if there's a mortgage on that, oh my gosh, that thing, massive expense every month. Okay. However, a property that someone else lives in, that you own, or that I own, that we own, that has a monthly positive cash flow, is an asset. That object does not take money out of my pocket. That object puts money into my pocket. Okay? That's it. So when we simplify it, many people think of a car. Most conventional financial planners will list cars and houses as assets. I don't. Why? Because a car, again, takes money out of my pocket. Period. So this is what not wealthy people do. Most of the time, they're taking their income and they're paying for their expenses. And again, this is okay. We all start here. There's nothing to feel bad about, nothing to feel, I'm not giving anybody a hard time here. I'm trying to upgrade your thinking. But most people take income and they pay for expenses, or they take income and pay for liabilities. Well, what's a liability? A liability could be a credit card, right? So we buy big screen TV, we don't pay cash, we put it on a credit card, and now we're paying whatever the heck it is, 29%, 28%, 17% on that dumb thing, right? So we don't want to do what this class of income production people do, okay? Here's what you want to do instead, and it's very simple. You want to take your income, you want to invest into cash flow producing assets, and then the assets cover your expenses, the assets cover your liabilities, and the assets acquire you more assets. Okay? That's the difference. And you might be thinking, oh, Paul, I'm not in a position where I could do that. BS. Okay? It's a mindset thing. So as kingdom builders operating with a kingdom operating system, we have two things. Number one, we need to learn how to make money. And then number two, we need to learn how to convert money into wealth. And so this is how the wealthy think. They take income and they buy assets, and then those assets pay for their expenses, pay for their liabilities. And what, liability could be boat, jet ski, Ferrari, whatever the heck they want to pay for, and also acquire and expand more assets. Because once you have your river covered here, which again is right here. Oops. Color, pen. Then you have surplus, right? And then that's when you can do amazing things. And if you architect your money flow sequence, right? Remember sequence? Johnny bit the dog, the dog bit Johnny. This is an issue of sequence. And here's where it starts to compound and magnify and multiply for you. Because income produced from assets is taxed way lower than income produced from a job. So first level of stewardship, right there, you can take your tax rate from 30+% down to basically zero. And again, we want to pay our fair share, but the tax code is built for investors, real estate investors, capital, stock market investors, and business owners. Period. That's a fact. Your long-term capital gains are taxed at half your short-term capital gains. Your dividend income is taxed at less than earned income. Everything is stacked against someone who makes their money through a job. Everything. So by flowing your cash this way, you can reduce your taxes, and that is a massive lever. Number two, by flowing your taxes or your cash this way, you can reduce your tax interest volume. Okay. If you look at the interest volume, meaning the percentage of interest on a house payment, it's stacked. The bulk of the beginning of the mortgage note is primarily interest. Why? Because they know that most people move. The average moving is 4 to 5 years. So during those 4 to 5 years, most of the payment goes towards interest. Banks making money. That's why the banks have the big buildings. Same thing with car notes to a degree. Same thing with credit card debts to a major degree. So by getting out of the cycle of the death spiral of using income to pay expenses, bad, then you check off the second thing, which is reduce your interest volume, which is your next biggest expense. Okay. So I know we're covering a lot here, but I want you to make sure you learn this, because you might be thinking, well, Paul, how do I start to invest in assets? Well, these properties that you acquire through the wealth path are assets, right? Certainly you could do dividend, you could invest in dividend producing stocks. Those are like maybe 3 to 4%. You could do some covered call options on top of that and bump it up another percentage point, but I don't mess with any of that stuff. Real estate, in my opinion, is the superior asset for production of cash flow producing assets. And let me show it to you here as a quick example, and then we'll get into the Q's and A's. What I have here is Deal Check. Deal Check. This is the app we suggest for your valuations. And I want to show you something here. This is a simple subject to property. The current value of the home or the current mortgage is 87 grand. And the purchase price is 90 grand, which means that the homeowner, for whatever reason, this situation requires a $3,000 down payment in essence. It requires $3,000 of cash. So here's what investors, and when I say investors, I mean in anything, an investor into real estate, an investor into the stock market, an investor into a business, an investor into cryptocurrency, an investor into a piece of artwork, an investor into a vintage vehicle, an investor into song rights, it's irrelevant, the vehicle. What matters is how you analyze it, and you analyze everything based on the numbers. So this one right here is what's called the COC, the cash on cash return. And this is what basically represents this, the cash flow production of the asset. Okay, you follow? Cash on cash return is the cash flow production of the asset. This asset produces 110% cash flow, cash on cash return. And it happens that in this particular case, this property is about $200 a month of positive cash flow. So you take $3,000, you invest it into this vehicle, and it produces $200 a month of cash flow, or 2 times 12 is what, $2,400 a year. Okay. Now, the cash on cash return on this thing is over 110%. Most people settle for, the last few years, the stock market has been in a bull market. That's going to be about to change with all this quantitative easing and money printing and all this other stuff that's coming down the pipeline. So, figure on average 7, 8%, 10%, 15%, which doesn't include your inflation, which doesn't include any of that stuff. This is an incredible cash on cash return. Absolutely incredible. Okay. Now this is if you had to pay $3,000. Now we suggest that you don't pay anything. However, I want to point this out to you that it's okay to make strategic investments to acquire these properties. And if you got a property and the homeowner wants some down payment that you don't have, let us know and we'll acquire this property. Okay. Now let's show you an example of, so in this case, what I did is I just changed one number. This doesn't require any, this requires $1. Okay. And look at the cash on cash return. It's 33,000%. Why? Because you're producing the same amount of monthly cash flow, $221, without any investment. It's an infinite return. It's an infinite return. So the whole thing of, well, you got to have money to make money, that's a lie from the pit of hell. You don't. You have to have wisdom to make money, knowledge to make money. And the key is, whatever you do, make sure that you're clear on what your monthly nut is, number one. Number two, make sure you're doing everything you can to reduce your monthly nut. There's plenty of things that we spend our money on that we don't need to. There's plenty of ways we can cut. And it would be better to do whatever you can do to create surplus to invest into cash flow producing assets. And oh, by the way, your finder's business is a cash flow producing asset. Oh, by the way, you are a cash flow producing asset. So whatever you have to do to invest in you and your business falls under what the wealthy people do. That's taking income and investing it into an asset. You and your business are assets. Okay. They're cash flow producing assets. So you have income. You want to do as much as you can at the beginning. Obviously you have to cover your bills and whatever, but you want to start to be thinking about, how can I save money so that I can invest into cash flow producing assets? How can I save money, set money aside so that I have dry powder, it's called, to invest into cash flow producing assets? And you have the deals that you're able to work in your business. And we're going to show you over the next week or two, we're going to have some new modules rolling out to show you additional ways to generate leads that are not Facebook dependent. So you can complement if you want more. You have things you can do to generate more leads, and you're off to the races. And so if I was starting all over again and I was not financially independent and I wanted to get financially independent, here's what I would do. I would simply invest in my brain. I'd read the Bible. I'd confess. I'd listen to Joel Osteen every day. I'd listen to Andrew Womack. I'd listen to fun, stand-up, clean comics. I would do my dailies, right? Invest in my brain. Number two, I would work my leads with excellence. And again, we're going to get you on average 1 lead a day. Some days you'll get more. Some days you won't get any. There'll be spaces of time where you don't get any for 4 days. And then you just let us know. And then we'll go and we'll refresh things and you'll get more leads. Are you going to be able to connect with 100% of the leads? No, absolutely not. I mean, give me a break. Think about it. Are you going to be able to convert 100% of the leads? No, absolutely not. But I would work my leads, and then I would figure out ways to generate more leads. And then I would get very good at the one script that we have. which allows you to create cash flow producing assets, right, with the pretty houses, and really any terms deal that you can negotiate, whether it's pretty or ugly. And then also it allows you to create chunks of cash, whether it's a junker, whether it's an ugly house, whether it's a one payday mechanism, where you're just assigning the contract pretty or ugly. Those are chunks of cash. Those are not cash flow producing assets. If you sell a contract and you make 10 grand, that is not a cash flow producing asset. In fact, that's going to be taxed at short-term capital gains. It's actually the equivalent of earned income. You're going to pay the most tax on those type of transactions. That's why I don't like them. The pretty house terms transactions, you're going to pay the least because of depreciation. The tax code allows you to depreciate that thing over 26, 27 years or whatever the heck it is, which will take your tax rate, again, very close down to zero. So you have the ability to generate money, but you want to be thinking long-term, which is how can I get more cash flow producing assets? And it's okay if you got to invest a couple grand into a transaction, because look at your return. You do not get this level of return in the stock market. You do not get this level of return with a mutual fund or an ETF or a dividend producing stock. This level of return is only available with something like a cash flow producing asset, right? Now you could do the same thing with rental property, although we don't like that. But the nice thing about these properties that you acquire with while leaving the existing financing in place is you certainly could rent it out. You own the asset. You own the asset without any liability. You own the asset without signing for it. You own the asset without qualifying for it. You own the asset without any type of risk to your credit, to your name, to anything. The way we show you how to do it, at least, it's infinite return. You're taking wisdom, knowledge, and understanding it, and you're converting it into value. And my friend, you deliver so much value to the marketplace, you just don't even have a clue. If your belief in this model is volatile, I cannot encourage you enough to go back to basics and reestablish how awesome this is. There's so many people out there that don't have enough equity to sell their house. Those people are screwed without somebody like you. They cannot afford the 10%, 15% it's going to cost to get a realtor involved. They can't sell it on their own. And this trend is only increasing in the marketplace with where we are economically and in the cycle of this COVID stuff. The tenant buyers, 70% of people cannot qualify for a conventional mortgage. You are the solution. Not only can you get them into a property, it's basically turnkey for them, where they don't have to submit themselves to a proctology exam to qualify. Number two, you can get them in the property for significantly less cash out of pocket. So it's less cash, it's easier for them. It's incredible. On the ugly side, you're dealing with properties that the sellers cannot sell because conventional mortgage, there are not lenders that will lend against a property that is in that level of disrepair. And the investor buyer on the other side of that equation, they're looking for those kind of opportunities. So you're meeting the needs of the seller, you're meeting the needs of the investor buyer. On the pretty side, you're meeting the needs of the seller, you're meeting the needs of the tenant buyer. You are in the maximum level of value add that you can possibly be, in my opinion. It is incredible. So if I was starting, I'd work my mindset and I'd work my business and I would invest in my business. I'm okay temporarily putting business expenses on a credit card because to me, that's not a liability. That is called leverage. Leverage is good. Wealthy people use leverage. Consumption, using leverage for consumption is bad and dumb. Wealthy people do not use a credit card to buy a big screen TV. Wealthy people will use a credit card to buy marketing to fund their business all day long. Wealthy people use a credit card to invest in training for their brain all day long. So you got to understand and you got to have clarity on your money flow and your money sequence and what you're shooting for. Because when you have enough assets kicking off, when you have enough cash flow producing assets, my friend, you are free and you actually don't even need to operate a business. Think about that. Let's say the monthly cash flow was $500. How many of those do you need to hit 10K a month? 5. You're 5 deals away, many of you, from financial independence. Now, when you work with bigger properties, you can even get more of a positive cash flow. When you get good at talking to sellers, I can take this seller and I can tell them that the only way I'm interested in this is if I can make $400 a month, and I can get them to subsidize $200 a month cash flow for the first year. Paul, why would they do that? Well, here's why. Because them investing $2,400 is way better than them having to spend. The after repair value of this thing is 125 grand. So if a realtor was involved, they're looking at 10%, 12 grand. So for them to disposition this house for $2,400 is way the heck better than for them to disposition this house for 12 grand and have to wait around to wait for that to happen. So please fight for clarity. God is not confused. The apple tree doesn't produce plums or kittens or zebras. It always produces apples. God is a God of order, and that needs to be reflected to a degree in our brains. We need to be orderly thinking people. We need to have clean thinking, clear thinking. And you want to focus on creating a river. You do that through cash flow producing assets. You are in the driver's seat with this business model because you can do that on demand. Look at this. Most people who would be acquiring this property, if this thing is worth 100, so most people that don't have the wisdom that we have, this is what their investment would look like. Let me see if I can find how to adjust this. So the purchase price, well, I won't get into all the specifics, but most people don't have the ability to buy properties without bringing in new financing. So if you're going to buy this thing, you're looking at a 20% down payment. That's 18 grand. And people will do that all day long. Now, the cash on cash return is going to be way less. It might be like 7-8%. But conventional buyers, investor buyers, will acquire properties for that level of cash on cash return all day long because their money can do better here than their money can do in the stock market. And they don't care what the market does. They don't care if the property value goes up. They don't care if there's appreciation. They don't care if the property value goes down. It's irrelevant because that monthly payment, that 276, comes in month after month after month. And the way we do it with a tenant buyer, it's almost like that's insured, that's guaranteed, because if they don't make a payment, then they lose their option, they lose their down payment, their option consideration. And on top of that, we have a better deal than just buy and hold investors because we don't have to deal with maintenance. We don't have to deal with toilets. We don't have to deal with any of that mess. The only problem we have is, if you call it a problem, is that some of the tenant buyers end up buying the properties, which leaves us in a pickle because now we got, in this case, the thing's worth 125 grand. We're paying off the $87,000 debt. So now you got a $30,000 capital gains event. That's a good problem to have because now you can invest that into other cash flow producing assets, or you can pay off some of your assets or whatever you want to do. But the bottom line is look, you gotta learn how to think clearly, think cleanly, understand what the wealthy do with their money. And God is not complicated. Wealth is not complex. It's simple. Deliver value, earn money, take the money, convert it into cash flow producing assets, focus like a machine, like a laser guided missile system on whatever that nut is. Keep working, keep working, keep working until you can generate the nut with assets, not with job, not with time. Get your money working for you instead of you working for your money. And then you're free. And then you can fire your boss if you so desire. Then you can work on your terms if you so desire. Plenty of great opportunities to contribute, but you're the head. And then you can sit down with a cup of coffee, your Bible, a yellow pad, and look out the window and download from the Lord what he wants you to do in this next season without constraint, without friction, without any weights, and you're free to thrive in the kingdom. And I promise you that when you're in that point, you wake up with a spring in your step, a song in your heart, a smile on your face, a twinkle in your eye, and you will literally be living in the matrix. You will be living in the matrix. And all of you, every single one of you on this call are less than a year away from making that happen if You work your mindset and work your business, period. The Bible says that in all labor, there is profit. What most of us confuse labor with is we think labor is watching videos. We think labor is putzing around with YouTube and in Facebook groups and reading blogs and podcasts and all that crap. That is not labor. Labor is harvesting the field. Labor is shearing the sheep. Labor is taking those assets to the marketplace. In our context, labor is generating leads, calling leads, and doing deal meetings. That's labor. And that's the work. And faith without works is dead. Faith with works is alive. So we got to have the hope, right? Faith is the substance of things hoped for. No hope, no faith. So we've got to have our hope engaged. We've got to have our work engaged. And then just trust God in his timing. Wealth is simple. It's not easy. The bottleneck for most people is they quit too soon. They get too frustrated. They don't discipline their brains to think clearly and correctly. They don't learn how to be good financial stewards. And they don't learn how to kick themselves in the butt and pick themselves up when they get knocked down. This Finders model has been in operation, best I can tell, for close to 40 years now. It's not going anywhere. It's economic proof. It's seasonal proof. It's COVID proof. It's government proof. It's tax proof. It is, again, in my opinion, the Ferrari business models. But just like any machine, any high performance machine, the constraint to that machine is the fuel you put into it. And if you're putting in fuel that has pollutants, contaminants, moisture, that Ferrari's not going to hum. That Ferrari's going to sputter. And God gives you the responsibility to fuel yourself with premium gasoline, baby. Right? You put that in, you do the sowing, God does the growing. You sow the seed, the farmer doesn't understand how it works, but he wakes up and boom, there's a crop. God's word is the seed. So put that in and trust him and depend on him and expect him to show up. Expect him to give you deals. Expect him to give you leads. Expect him to help you harvest. That's how you build it. And if you could just make one pivot in your brain, which is, you know what? There's probably some things about operating a kingdom business that I'm not aware of. And there's probably some blind spots that I have that I just can't see yet. But I trust my daddy's a good daddy. I trust I'm here at the right time with the right people, with the right model. And I'm just going to work like it's up to me. I'm going to pray like it's up to him. I'm going to just put my head down and I'm not going to look to the right. I'm not going to look to the left. I'm not even going to care about the results. I'm just going to do the best I can. And if you would make the pivot to just do that for the next 6 months, I promise you, in 6 months or less, you will not recognize yourself. You will not recognize your headspace, and you will not recognize your bank accounts. You will not recognize your hope. You will not recognize your zest and passion for life if you do that one thing. So I encourage you, do that one thing. Okay. I also encourage you, I'm done. So Daryl, if you want to queue up the Q's and A's, I would encourage you all to go through this 40 minutes multiple times, take notes, live with this, learn about this, think about this, focus on this, and it'll help you. It'll be a blessing. I wish someone would have taught me this when I was first getting started. Man, it would have saved me so much time and effort, heartache, tears, sweat, blood. So you don't really need much more than this paradigm blueprint and your Finder's business, and you'll be unstoppable. Unstoppable.